So this is worksheet number 1, going over the digestive system. So I guess you guys already got through most of this page. So as you know, food moves through the alimentary canal, through the mouth, then the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestines, the large intestines, and colon, and out through the anus. This is a tube known as like the alimentary canal, and it is considered outside, like you would have heard Janet in lecture said it was outside the body, because literally the tube portion of it is outside. I don't know how else to explain it. So there are two portions of the digestive system. This first part is the alimentary canal, and then there are accessory organs. The alimentary canal, food moves through. Accessory organs, food does not move through. That's the basic, I guess, generalization of it. So what are some structures of the accessory organs? Pancreas, liver, gallbladder, yep. So basically, if you think in terms of does food move through it, yes or no? If it's a yes, it's an alimentary canal. If it's a no, it's an accessory organ. So a little bit obvious, but hopefully that puts things in perspective. So number 3 is asking, all organs of the alimentary canal produce digestive enzymes. Is this true or false? This is false. The esophagus and large intestine do not produce enzymes. They just basically function as tubes. Do you know what the large intestine does at all? Absorbs water and electrolytes, yep.
They produce mucus.
Yeah, mucus. Wonderful mucus, which we love, right? Right? Everyone loves mucus. So yeah, that's that portion of it. Question number 4 is posing, what is not an accessory organ of the digestive system? And it is none of the above. All of those are accessory organs. So the gallbladder, the pancreas, the salivary glands, and the liver. Gallbladder produces bile. The pancreas produces pancreatic juice, also insulin, but in this case we're just going to focus on the pancreatic juice portion of it. Salivary glands are glands that produce saliva. Food doesn't move through it, but it does move through the mouth. And then the liver produces the bile, while the gallbladder stores the bile. So that is the gist of it. They aid in digestion, but food does not pass through it. So this was a question that was in your study guide that Janet had up. So there are 4 layers of the alimentary canal. So as you can see, I want you to label from the innermost to the outermost. So the most inner layer is the mucosa. Then the submucosa, the muscularis, and the serosa. So in terms of the mucosa, okay, that has goblet cells and endocrine cells for secretion, right? We all love mucus. Submucosa is the next layer out. This absorbs substances and nutrients from the bloodstream. So if you think about the submucosa absorbing nutrients from the bloodstream and everything, where do you think there would be the most submucosa in the body? Small intestine, because the small intestine is absorbing most of the nutrients. The muscularis is the next layer out, and this is responsible for the churning action. And in terms of digestive organs, which one has the most muscular movement? Stomach, right. So if you were to dissect a stomach, you would find the muscularis much thicker in the stomach than you would in the small intestine. Next is the serosa, and the serosa is pretty much like a capsule that kind of keeps it all together. Very, very thin, and it basically just serves to protect tissue. So now we are at the sympathetic versus the parasympathetic system. So what is the difference between the sympathetic and parasympathetic? They're both part of the nervous system, yeah. The sympathetic is more the fight or flight, So think about the S like stimulated, sympathetic, while the parasympathetic is the more of the rest and digest. So in the first question, sympathetic impulses are known to decrease digestive activity. This is true. Sympathetic, I had to read that a second time. Sympathetic system decreases digestive activity. So you can think about it in terms of when does a sympathetic kick in? Like when you're panicked, right? The last thing you want to do when you're getting like chased by something is, and is in this description, but the last thing you want to do is take a poop. Just saying. You're getting chased by a lion, right? Your sympathetic system kicks in. So your parasympathetic or your rest and digestion is going to slow down. This is another reason why people, you hear the rule, I don't know if this is, there's like that cliche rule, don't go swimming after 30 minutes of eating because you'll throw up. Well, it's because when you eat food, your blood goes to your organs. That's why you get kind of tired, because it goes away from your brain, right? But your blood pools to your organs, so they're able to absorb the nutrients that are from your food. Well, if you're swimming, that blood is not able to go to your organs. It's going to your muscles, and your body just kind of rejects it because it just can't process it. It can't, it can't do anything. It's not getting oxygenated, so it just throws up. So if that kind of helps you, don't go swimming after 30 minutes of eating. Let's see. Blood is also, you can think about it in terms of energy. You need energy to digest. That too. Because your blood carries oxygen, which your cells need to function. So that's two things. Let's see. Parasympathetic impulses are known to decrease digestive activity. This is false. Parasympathetic system is the rest and digest. A way to think about the parasympathetic system is parasympathetic, paralyzed. You're not going to move. You're going to rest and digest. So if that kind of helps you, that helps me some. Yes. So now we're going to go through any questions on the nerve system. Okay. Now we're going to go through just some vocabulary. So chewing. Chewing is known as mastication. Swallowing, or deglutination is known as swallowing, which is actually my favorite, deglutination. Peristalsis is a transport of food in the esophagus to the stomach. And then two mixing movements include churning and segmentation. Churning happens in the stomach, while segmentation happens in the small intestine. And this is pretty much black and white, straightforward. So, and there is a video I'll show after this worksheet, so maybe that'll help. So next, any questions on those? No? Okay. Enzymes that the saliva contains is amylase. And what does amylase digest? What is it? No, not protein. What's, like when you eat something sugary, you start like salivating. At least I do. So that's how I think of amylase. It digests the sugars, the glucose, the carbohydrates. So something to keep in mind, whenever you see the word ACE at the end of something, it is an enzyme. And this will become really important when we go through the second worksheet with all the digestive juices and everything. ACE means it's an enzyme of something. But now that if we go through all these other ones, so like you said, protease, an enzyme that digests protein. Nuclease, an enzyme that digests nucleic acids, which can be found in DNA, like in your meats. Amylase, like we said, was from the saliva, and then lipase is an enzyme that digests lipids. So it's if you took medical terminology, this will hopefully be helpful. Mm-hmm. Nucleic acids. Glucose. Yeah. I know. Just wait till you get to the glucose, the glycogen, and the glucagon. Woohoo! Yeah. It just takes repetition and practice. So lipids. Yep. I know they gave us a break with this one, right? Good golly, thank you. So going away from enzymes back to the more of the anatomy, there are three portions of the pharynx. There's the nasopharynx, which is basically like your nasal area. I believe your book has a pretty good diagram of it. It should at least. The next one is your oropharynx, which oro, you can think of oral, and that's kind of more in your mouth. It's a little bit lower, and that's where your swallowing reflex is. And then you have your laryngopharynx, which is basically your throat. So any questions on that? Okay. Going away from the pharynx, we're going to start talking about conditions of the esophagus. So the two that are conditions of the esophagus is heartburn and hiatal hernias. So ulcer and vomiting, that is not heartburn and hiatal hernia. So what is heartburn? So when the stomach acid comes into the esophagus, it has that burning sensation behind your heart. So you're like, oh, heartburn. It's never pleasant. And then a hiatal hernia is when, and I can look this up. It's when a portion of the stomach protrudes through the, what's the video? Hiatal. So this is, this is normal right here. And your sphincter is here, right? And your sphincter closes off gastric acid, right? It prevents it from coming up. It's just esophageal, yeah. Because I think the pyloric one is under. But as you can see, when this part of your diaphragm, and the diaphragm is the muscle here that controls breathing, it kind of a pouch of your stomach kind of slips out. So here's your sphincter now. It kind of moved, and you have some of your stomach here. So you have this gastric acid kind of pools at the bottom, and that sphincter can't function because it's not where it's positioned properly. So then also you have some gastric reflux. They're not that fun either. So since we talked about the esophagus, now we're going to move on to the stomach. And this next question is asking, a large amount of absorption occurs in the stomach, true or false? False, right. So the stomach is responsible for a lot of secreting enzymes to break down protein and lipids, but the stomach doesn't absorb anything. It just kind of breaks everything down because, and why would we want to break things down? So it's easier to move through the small intestine, okay? What else? Absorbed easier, yeah. So if you have okay, so this is a big chunk of food before the stomach, and this is what happens after the stomach, okay? So this is surface area, okay? The area around it, but you see how when you break it down, you have more surface area? So you can actually get more nutrients per amount of whatever you ate because of the increased surface area. So that's another thing too. If you see anything about surface area, it just helps increase absorption because it breaks it down. So there's that. Coffee isn't kicked in, you know. There you go. But the stomach is really important to break down food. So that's what's most important. So you can think about it in terms of the function or the anatomy defines the physiology, the shape of it or the structure defines the function of it. Right, the stomach is completely made of muscle, muscularis. There isn't very much submucosa there for the absorption. So if you cut open the stomach, you'll find a thick muscularis because it works with the churning. Next one, the stomach initiates protein digestion. This is true. And the stomach accounts for 50 to 40% of secretory responses to a meal. This is also true. So your stomach basically like secretes a lot and is like attack. Must digest this, whatever was consumed. So 3 phases of gastric secretion is the cephalic phase, the gastric phase, and the intestinal phase. Okay. The cephalic phase is, so when you start smelling food, right, your stomach starts to growl a little bit. You kind of get that, right? That's cephalic. Whenever you see the word CEF, or CEPH, I'm sorry, you're talking about your head, your cephalic region. So actually what's interesting is when your stomach is growling, the inside of it, you have like rugae, right? You have that bumpy structure inside your stomach, and it is constantly rubbing up against itself. So when you eat food, it can easily digest, but when you don't have food in there, that rugae rubs up against each other, and that's what causes the growling sound. So, but yes, your cephalic region, your stomach starts churning to prepare to eat. Gastric phase is when your stomach secretes a bunch of gastric juices, gastric enzymes. After you eat, yeah, it's inside you, and then it moves on to the intestines, and that is the intestinal phase. In your intestines, so if the cephalic region tells your stomach prepare, the gastric phase tells your stomach break down food, your intestines tell the stomach stop breaking down food. You're done. The food is out of you. The food is inside of us. We are the intestines, inside us, not in you. Stop secreting hydrochloric acid because you're going to burn us out. So the intestinal phase inhibits gastric secretion, if that makes sense. So there's that. So now that we're talking about the stomach, 2 conditions of the stomach is an ulcer and vomiting. So we talked about vomiting earlier. That's when your stomach basically just rejects whatever was in a meal, and this could be, due to exercise after you exercise after you eat, or it could be due to, food poisoning. That's a defense mechanism, is when your stomach just throws up. So really anything can cause vomiting. You can also induce vomiting. It's not encouraged, though. But then the next condition is an ulcer. And ulcers, do you know what ulcers are?
Is that where like a hole
Yeah.
started?
When there's like an erosion.
Yeah.
So it's basically like when there's like a hole, like you said, in your stomach, and so usually your stomach is really well protected from gastric juice. Okay? But when there's a hole in it, then this gastric juice can get into it and kind of irritate it and cause it to flare up. Well, it could be that. It could also be poor diet. But actually, there was a study by 2 scientists. I don't remember their names. But they were studying H. pylori, which is a type of bacteria. And they were trying to prove that H. pylori actually caused the ulcers to happen. For a while, the scientific community didn't see that as plausible. So what they did, these 2 scientists, they prepared 2 flasks of H. pylori. They both drank it, and they both got stomach ulcers. So, I mean, if that's a way to get your stuff proven, I mean,
Okay,
what else?
that's right.
There you go.
Can those be cured, like over time, like they'll go just like skin, or you're kind of stuck with it forever now?
I think you're kind of stuck with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe it's a pretty permanent condition. It's because it's an infection, and once you have damage, you have damage. You can't correct it.
Especially inside your stomach, sometimes
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want to let it heal.
yeah. So, I mean, maybe you could get rid of the bacteria, but the damage is still there.
Yeah.
But like you said, you can't heal. So, so this is some regulatory methods of gastric secretions. In the top box is neural regulation. Oh my goodness, I cannot talk today. And this bottom box is hormonal regulation. So this is just a quick little guide to the most important things that you're going to be looking at. So this first one, neuroregulation, that decreases gastric activity and gastric activity, secretion, and motility. This would be your sympathetic impulse. This decreases the fight or flight portion of it decreases gastric activity. The next one, which is down here, parasympathetic, is the answer to neuroregulation that increases gastric activity, promotes the release of histamine, which stimulates gastric secretion. So your parasympathetic impulse, your rest and digest, you can just sit back and let your body do the working, right? So now that we're going to move on to hormones, gastrin is the first one, a hormonal regulation that increases gastric juice secretion and motility. So gastrin, think about gastrin, gastric acid, you know. The middle one can be found at the very top of the options. Somatostatin. Somatostatin is a hormonal regulation that inhibits hydrochloric acid secretion. So it stops, so while gastrin is saying go, somatostatin is saying no, stop. And the next one, which is very important, is CCK, cholecystokinin. And this is a hormonal regulation that decreases gastric secretion and motility. CCK is released by the small intestine when proteins and fats enter. So in that way,
Take a little more time to digest.
yeah. Well, basically, so wait, what is your question?
Um, Proteins and fats take longer to digest quickly, so
Yeah.
that's why.
Yeah, proteins and fats do. But the reason why CCK is triggered is because, so this is your stomach right here. This is your small intestine. Is when proteins and fats enter. What's also entering is gastric acid, and your intestines can only take so much of that. So your intestines know that when it enters your intestine, you're pretty much done eating, right? Because your stomach gets full, then it digests, then it goes. That's kind of how the process works. Or some people overeat, but so originally it's kind of all in your stomach, and then when it moves on, your intestines kind of sense this and tells the stomach, okay, stop secreting stuff. There's no more food in you. What are you doing? So the intestines kind of play a really big role in digestion. But you are right that protein and lipids take quite a while to digest. So, but that's more why. Does that make sense? Okay. The next one, we're going to be talking about the accessory organs now. The pancreas. Okay. The pancreas acts as an exocrine gland and an endocrine gland. So it has like a dual action. The pancreas is really important for secreting the hormone insulin in the endocrine system, which we learned about last unit and got through, But an exocrine gland is a gland that what? What did exocrine?
That secretes to the outside.
Yeah, secretes into a duct. Yeah. So in this case, the pancreas is going to be secreting a lot of pancreatic juices that go into the duct. And it goes into the, let's see, the hepatopancreatic ampulla is where it joins with but the duodenum's the intestine. So it goes from the pancreas to the duct to the small intestine, and it would go into the duodenum. So there's a rationale you can, look through a little bit that kind of says why this is true, why this is false. The pancreatic duct and common bile duct join together to form the hepatopancreatic ampulla. So you can think about hepatopancreatic, hepato meaning liver, and pancreatic meaning pancreas. And another thing to keep in mind is the bile, gallbladder, the bile duct, is right by the liver, because your liver produces bile. Bile is stored in the gallbladder, and then it goes through the duct with the pancreatic secretions. So basically, the gallbladder and the pancreas and the digestive system are in cahoots. They are secreting stuff pretty much at the same time. It's all going through this duct, and it is digesting everything that you've consumed. So just let's do a little bit of a refresher. Gastric juice contains enzymes that digest carbs, fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. This is false. Gastric juice does not digest carbs, but it does everything else, pretty much. So that is why we need the pancreas to secrete everything the pancreas secretes to make up for what the stomach can't do. So basically, we'll go from the pancreas into the small intestine. So regulation of pancreatic secretions and its definitions. Secretin is this bottom one, a hormonal regulation that functions to neutralize stomach acid and inhibit gastric secretion and motility. So secretin tells the stomach, stop churning, stop moving, there's no more food in you, what are you doing? Secretin also, so gastric acid is really, really acidic, and that's really important for the stomach to initially break stuff down, but when it's in the small intestine, it's not necessary to be that acidic. And your intestines are very fragile, they're not thick. They function more for reabsorption. So secretin functions to tell to neutralize the stomach acid, to make it less acidic. The next one, CCK, again, very important. Hormonal regulation. It stimulates the pancreas to release pancreatic juice and inhibits gastric secretion and motility. So CCK will tell the stomach, stop moving. Not stop moving, but stop moving it so fiercely, and stop secreting gastric acid, because the intestines don't need it. And then CCK will then go from the intestine to the pancreas and tell the pancreas to secrete pancreatic juices in order to digest the nutrients and everything further. The top one, neuroregulation that increases secretion of pancreatic juice. It's part of the parasympathetic nervous system, is the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is connected, goes from your brain, and it connects like pretty much every organ in your body. So that's part of your parasympathetic system. Next one, pancreatic acinar cells are epithelial cells that secrete digestive enzymes, buffers, and hormones. This is false. They do not secrete hormones, but it does everything else. It functions with the digestive enzymes in the buffers. Your hormones, though, are secreted by pancreatic islets. Largest internal organ is the liver. So now we're going to jump from the pancreas, accessory organ, to the liver. And the liver what are some things the liver does? Detoxes. Yeah. It's like the filter. And most people eat it. I mean, it has nutrients, but it also has all the other crap that was in the body. So I don't know. Lots of iron, I guess, right? Because it contains also like broken down red blood cells, so there's some stored hemoglobin there, but in terms of eating the filter, I'm sorry if you like liver. Okay. um, so so the hepatic portal vein, whenever you see the word hepatic, you're going to think about the liver. That's what's Latin for it. So the hepatic portal vein, all of these statements are true except for C. C states that 1/3 of the blood is supplied by the hepatic portal vein to the liver. This is false. The hepatic portal vein actually supplies 2/3 of blood to the liver, which you think is kind of odd, because you're, in terms of a vein, you're thinking, well, wait a minute, vein has deoxygenated blood, which is true. What happens is the hepatic portal vein is the vein that goes away from the intestine. So in terms of, let's draw a picture. So this is your liver, and this is your intestine. Lovely. Your hepatic portal vein, let's do blue, goes from your intestines to your liver and to the rest of your body. So your liver gets to filter everything that because your intestines just absorb things. It doesn't have any differentiation. So your liver will receive everything that the intestines absorb. So it gets a lot of the nutrients, it gets a lot of the iron, it gets a lot of the goodies, but then it also has to filter a lot of things. So true statements about the hepatic portal vein, and this is the vein from the intestines to the liver, is made up of blood from the capillaries of other intestinal organs. Okay, true. Carries deoxygenated blood toward the liver. So even though this blood is deoxygenated, it's only, you guys haven't started blood, have you? Okay, so usually veins, even though it's known as deoxygenated, veins actually carry about 75% oxygen. So there's still some oxygen in there, but not nearly as much as an artery. Hepatic portal vein supplies 2/3 of blood to the liver, and this venous blood contains absorbed nutrients. So again, the liver gets first picks at all the goodies that the intestines absorb, but it also has to filter everything to protect the body. And then there's also hepatic portal artery that contains oxygenated blood too, that nourishes liver cells. So it also has an artery of its own, but not nearly as big as the vein. The vein is huge. So we're going to look at some, you don't need to list all of these off, but there's some regulatory functions of the liver, and then there's some hematologic regulatory functions. So hematologic has to do with blood. So how does the liver interact with the blood? And this first portion is about how the liver interacts with the rest of the body through metabolism. So this is your favorite part, right? Glycogen and glucose, that has to do with the liver, right? The liver stores glucose, which is known as glycogen. It oxidizes fatty acids, so it breaks them down. It regulates blood levels of triglycerides, fatty acids, and cholesterol, as well as, like what's with cholesterol here, like LDL, your HDL, those sorts of things. Your liver is important for that. It converts carbohydrates and proteins into fats. So even if you are, dieting, and you think if you eat a lot of carbs or if you eat a lot of proteins, you're not going to gain weight, you will, because your liver will convert that into fats for your body. I know, right? Damn liver. And then deaminates excess amino acids. That basically means, so an amino acid is a protein. Deaminates means it kind of rips them apart, because proteins are basically like walls, and amino acids are like the bricks. So your liver just is trying to find its resources, and then it forms urea. And what does urea eventually turn into? Urine. Yeah, there you go. And urine is basically like broken down pieces of proteins. So you with your friend at Purdue with the proteins. Can ask him how does urea. Yeah, he'll send you something about that too. So, and this will be sent to you, so you'll have this. Good? Okay. Some there's also removes toxins from the blood, inactivates drugs in the blood. So that's also known as, if you take pharmacology, the first pass effect happens when your liver takes some of the drugs out that you ingest. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you ever take pharmacology, first pass effect happens in the liver. Some logical regulatory functions of the liver. This has to do with your blood. Synthesizes plasma proteins. Plasma proteins are like your albumin, your globulin, and your fibrinogen. You don't have to know about this till we get to the blood, but you'll learn about it. But it's not that bad. But those are plasma proteins. Hematologic has to do with your blood again. Stores glycogen, iron, vitamins A, D, and B12. Your liver phagocytizes damaged red blood cells and foreign substances and antigens. So your liver kind of breaks, eats away at bacteria sometimes if it gets that far. It removes antibodies from the blood. It removes toxins such as alcohol and certain drugs from the blood, and it acts as a blood reservoir. So liver is very important. Very complicated, yeah. And just to think about those liver cells, each of those. So let's see. And you will get this sent out. I'm just going to go through. Bile. So it's asking about what is bile not made up of. Carbon dioxide. The rest of those is basically a list of everything bile is made up of. So bile is made up of electrolytes. Bile is made up of bile salts, iron, bilirubin, water, and biliverdin. So, and the color of bile, that greenish color pigmentation, comes from biliverdin and bilirubin. Bile, this next question, it says bile breaks down fat as an enzymatic process. This is false. Bile functions to emulsify fats. So it kind of like dissolves fats. Enzymes break things apart. Emulsify is like dissolving, so to speak. So if you see the word emulsify, think bile, think fats. But there is an enzyme that does break down fats, and that is lipase, but that's elsewhere. Just bile emulsify fats. So going into bile salts, this is, since Janet likes to ask a lot of what is true, what is false, this is a what is not true. What is not a characteristic of bile salts? Well, all these are characteristics except for C. Bile salts do not have a digestive function. That's false. Bile salts are the only component with a digestive function. So you can change that and all those will be true. I don't know. Does that make sense? No. They do have a digestive function. So if you take out the word not, then that statement will be true. Yeah. Yep. But bile salts are produced from cholesterol. So cholesterol is important. Too much cholesterol, though, is dangerous. Bile salts can be reabsorbed, recycled, and reused. Bile salts do have a digestive function. Bile salts emulsify fats, and bile salts help with the absorption of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. So, what are water-soluble vitamins? B and C. So, these are fat-soluble. No, go ahead. What were you saying? Oh, yeah. So, something that will help, and this we'll go over with vitamins. So you have B and C. So think about the blue C. So these are water soluble. which means they dissolve in water. So excluding like pregnancy, okay, because that's the exception to everything. If you can eat or drink as much B and C vitamins, and it won't hurt you because you'll just pee them out. So this is a deck, like a deck that is on the sea, I guess. So these vitamins are not water soluble, so they kind of float on top of water, kind of like a deck does. So A, D, E, and K vitamins. So, yeah. Hopefully that helps. So these are fat soluble. So water soluble vitamins can only be absorbed if we have water in our body, which we have lots of. So thank God for that. But the A, D, E, and K vitamins can only be absorbed if we have fat in our body because they're fat soluble. So they dissolve in fat, which means if they can dissolve in fats, then we can absorb them after they get dissolved. And this typically in bile is what is responsible for that, because bile contains cholesterol and fatty substance that kind of helps with that. So if that helps for the most part. So any questions on bile salts? Okay. So bile is secreted by the hepatic cells in the liver and stored in the gallbladder. Yes. So your hepatic cells are your liver cells. Bile is made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and released as needed. This next question, so we're going to be moving away from the accessory organ. We were just talking about bile, and now we're going to move back into the alimentary canal, which is the intestine. So now we're going to where food is, digested food. So what is true of the small intestine? This is a select all that apply. You're going to select B, C, and E. The small intestine absorbs nutrients. The small intestine transports the residue to the large intestine, and the large intestine, does most of the absorption of waters and electrolytes back into the body, mainly sodium, though. And the residue is like the leftovers, so the stuff we don't need is getting transported out, the waste products. And the small intestine completes digestion of nutrients in chyme. So chyme is what's broken down in the stomach. Chyme then goes to the small intestine, and the small intestine then absorbs everything. Three sections of the large intestine are the duodenum. The duodenum contains Brummer's glands, which are basically glands that secrete like a thin mucousy fluid, very fluidy mucus, I guess. The jejunum, yeah. Wait, which one were you asking?
Yeah, I think I got that backwards.
So, yeah. So your jejunum is the one that has most of the absorption of nutrients happening. And then the ileum contains Peyer's patches. And what are Peyer's patches? Did you guys go in a lab yet? I think so. So your Peyer's patches have bacteria, right? So that's in your ileum. So when you hear about your gut flora, that's in your intestine. Like yogurt has live active cultures in it, you'll see that. That's great for your intestines. Which is, if you think about where all your food and everything's coming from. So if your intestines are happy, your whole body's happy, right? So at least that's the most part. Chocolate is good too, but oh, it's good for everything. So three methods that regulate the small intestine: mechanical stimulation, So mechanical stimulation is like when it moves through segmentation. Contact with chyme. So chyme contacting the small intestine, right? When the small intestine detects that there's gastric acid coming in, it tells the stomach stop secreting. And then distension of the intestinal wall. So when your intestines distend, that's how they know, like, oh, we need to start doing stuff because we need to get this out. And then number 37, the small intestine is the most important organ. This is true because it digests pretty much everything and it absorbs everything. So, I threw a bunch of vocabulary at you. I guess you're welcome. But this is stuff that will pop up in the book that, having a little bit of a definition will hopefully help. So this bottom one is microvilli. Increases the surface area of absorption for digestive end products. So if you look at your intestine like this, okay? Which one has larger surface area? The top one or the bottom one? The bottom one, right? Because there are these creases that increase the surface area versus this, not very much. So it's kind of like what your microvilli do. They increase surface area. So capillaries is third from the bottom. Capillaries provide a transportation system for absorbed nutrients. Right? Because once we absorb the nutrients, we need to transport them throughout the body. The next one, second from the bottom, goes to lacteals, and these absorb some large lipids from the lumen. And lumen is just like a layer. So, and you'll learn about lacteals in the immune system. Just keep that in mind. The next one is at the second from the top, circular folds of mucosa. This is Plicae circularis. I botched that one. But they're circular folds, so see circular, that makes sense. The next one, intestinal epithelial cells are at the very top. These secrete digestive enzymes. So epithelial cells is a layer of cells. These secrete digestive enzymes for you to break down food. Next one is villi. Increased surface area for reabsorption, just like with the microvilli. And then the intestinal glands are crypts of Lieberkuhn. I don't know. Secrete a watery fluid containing no digestive enzymes. So the watery fluid just basically helps lubricates and moves things through. So, all good stuff. Wait, you guys aren't done. Okay, good. Okay, and then the last one, false of the large intestine. What is false is the statement C. It is responsible for a large amount of digestive activity. That's false. The large intestine secretes mucus, which we all love, right? Yay, mucus. It absorbs 90% of water because our body likes water, so we want to take that all back in. And the large intestine houses your gut flora. But as far as a large amount of digestive activity, not really much. Still important, but not very much. So that concludes the end of this worksheet 1. So let's see.